The words Camilla hurled at Princess Catherine weren't just rude, they were cruel. In fact, that even the most loyal palace staff were left stunned. And when one brave insider decided to act instead of whisper, everything changed. Camilla had spent years securing her position. Once the outsider, then the queen consort. But in a matter of hours, her title became meaningless. Her authority quietly dismantled. And the person behind it all? Prince William, silent, steady, but now suddenly unstoppable. It started with what was supposed to be a standard meeting in one of Windsor's smaller royal wings. No press, no flashing cameras, just a handful of key figures discussing upcoming royal appearances. But what should have been a quiet session turned into the royal version of an ambush. According to multiple sources, Camilla's tone grew sharp. Her voice carried, and her target? Princess Catherine. She didn't raise her voice for drama. She raised it to wound. Catherine, they say, was blindsided. The queen consort accused her of being too image-conscious, too adored by the public, too hungry for the spotlight. She even took jabs at Catherine's parenting, her press coverage, and, in an especially vicious twist, suggested she was too common for the crown. Catherine sat in silence, but the room did not, because someone in that room refused to let it slide. One of the palace's most trusted staffers, a person known for discretion and unwavering loyalty, took a risk that few ever have inside the monarchy. They documented what they'd heard, every word, every insult, and they delivered it directly to Prince William's team. No spin, no rumor, just facts. When the report landed on William's desk, aides say he read it once, then he read it again, and then he stood up. That was all it took. For years, William had played the peacemaker, the dutiful son, the future monarch who bit his tongue to preserve family unity. But this wasn't just another snub or a frosty glance. This was humiliation. This was an attack on his wife, the mother of his children, the woman he's loved since university. And this time, he would not stay silent. What followed wasn't a screaming match or public showdown. That's not William's style. Instead, he moved quietly but decisively. First, Camilla was cut from all appearances involving Catherine. No shared stages, no overlapping engagements. Events she had co-hosted for years? Gone. Invitations? Rescinded. Her name? Scrubbed from official planning documents. And all without a single headline from the palace. The silence was deafening. Inside the royal inner circle, they call it the Wales Wall. A protective barrier now firmly placed between Catherine and the woman who had crossed too many lines. And behind that wall, William stood firm. Camilla, once a central figure in public events, began to disappear. Not entirely, not officially, but noticeably. The spring charity circuit? She vanished. Trooping the color? No Camilla on the balcony. Military events, diplomatic receptions, engagements involving the Wales children? All removed from her calendar. Some said she was resting. Others whispered about health concerns. But palace insiders knew better. This was no medical break. This was punishment. Silent, precise, unapologetic. Even within her own staff, the shift was felt. Longtime aides were reassigned. Others were told to filter communication through Charles's office, not hers. Her independence? Quietly clipped. Her reach? Shrinking by the day. All the while, Catherine said nothing. She didn't need to. Her next public appearance told the story for her. 3 days after the confrontation, Catherine stepped out wearing one of Princess Diana's most iconic pieces, the sapphire brooch. Positioned perfectly on her coat, it shimmered with meaning. This wasn't just fashion, it was a message. And the world understood. She walked in like a queen. One royal watcher tweeted, "No drama, just dignity." That day, Catherine met with children at a local hospital, offering gentle smiles, soft waves, and warm conversation. But beneath that warmth was something stronger: resolve. The message was clear: she would not be shaken. While Catherine moved forward, Camilla stood still. The woman who had once worked tirelessly to rebuild her image after Diana's tragedy now found herself unraveling. The decades of effort, the slow climb from public disdain to royal acceptance, suddenly under threat. And this time, there was no crisis manager who could spin it, because the public had already made up their minds. Hashtags like #StandWithKate and #NotMyQueen trended across the globe. Royal fans, journalists, and even celebrities weighed in. She wears grace like armor, One viral post read, "And the world sees it." People weren't just angry at Camilla. They were angry at a system that allowed this to fester in silence. For too long, Catherine had endured the coldness behind palace smiles. Now, she had endured a storm and emerged unshaken. Even King Charles couldn't ignore it. Sources say William confronted his father directly. A private meeting was called. No aides, no distractions, just father and son. And inside that room, William reportedly issued his own royal ultimatum. If she cannot respect Catherine, he said, she has no place beside her in public. Charles was stunned, not because he didn't believe William, but because deep down he knew William was right. Camilla's position had become a liability. The public wasn't rallying behind her anymore. They were rallying behind Catherine. Senior advisors began suggesting Camilla step back from appearances, officially for rest, but unofficially for damage control. Charles, ever the pragmatist, complied. Behind palace doors, loyalties began to shift. Staff who had once sworn allegiance to Camilla now quietly requested transfers to the Wales household. There, they said, was calm, respect, humanity, and above all, leadership. Catherine didn't scream. She didn't plot. She didn't leak stories to the press. She didn't need to. Her silence said it all. This wasn't just a personal clash. This was a changing of the guard. Camilla still holds the title of Queen Consort, but insiders now whisper she holds it in name only. Her calendar is thinning, her influence fading, and her voice muted. Meanwhile, Catherine is stepping into a new light, not through force, but through quiet resilience. She isn't asking to be queen. She's becoming one, without saying a word. And William? He isn't just the heir. He's now the defender of the crown's future. A man who once bowed to tradition is now shaping it. He drew a line. He said enough. And the palace is still reeling from the aftershock. This isn't just royal gossip. This is history. Because for the first time in a generation, a royal marriage has rewritten the rules. Not through scandal, not through rebellion, but through love, through boundaries, through a refusal to let the old ways silence what is right. Camilla tried to cut Catherine down, but in doing so, she cut herself off. And in that space, Catherine rose, not just as a princess, not even as a queen, but as the beating heart of a monarchy that must evolve or die. This isn't a crown that's passed. It's a crown that's earned. And as long as the people have a voice, Catherine wears it, whether the palace admits it or not. Because in the story of royalty, titles come and go, but dignity, that endures. And Prince William just proved that the future of the monarchy rests not in tradition, but in the strength of the woman he chose to protect. As the royal family tried to present a united front to the outside world, the undercurrents inside the palace told a very different story. The power dynamics had shifted, not with declarations, but with decisions made in silence, behind velvet curtains and gilded doors. Staff no longer whispered about Camilla's ascent. They speculated on her inevitable descent. And that speculation wasn't unfounded. Suddenly, long-standing partnerships began to dissolve. Charities that had once relied on Camilla's patronage began to distance themselves quietly. Emails went unanswered. Invitations were lost in transit. One prominent women's advocacy group, once tightly aligned with the Queen Consort's initiatives, made a subtle but symbolic change on their website. Camilla's photo was replaced with Catherine's. No statement, just a shift in spotlight. Meanwhile, social media was ablaze. Younger generations who had never warmed to Camilla now found themselves rallying behind Catherine, not just as a royal, but as a woman who had weathered storms with grace. TikToks dissected her outfits for hidden meanings. Instagram pages exploded with side-by-side comparisons of Diana and Catherine, calling them the people's queens. Twitter, or X, as some now called it, was flooded with support for the true heart of the monarchy. And Catherine? She kept showing up. A visit to a veteran's home here, a literacy initiative there. With every engagement, she brought the kind of warmth and sincerity that couldn't be manufactured. Cameras may have followed, but it was the authenticity behind her actions that people clung to. She listens. One mother said tearfully after Catherine sat with her autistic son during a school visit. She didn't rush off. She knelt down and just cared. Compare that to Camilla's absence, and the contrast was glaring. Even within the press, the tides turned. Journalists who had once walked on eggshells around Camilla's reputation now wrote with sharpened pens. "Has Queen Camilla overplayed her hand?" asked one headline. Another simply read, "The crown backs Kate." Once feared, Camilla's PR machine began sputtering. And where once it had controlled the narrative, it now found itself chasing one. Inside Clarence's house, the Queen Consort's mood reportedly darkened. Close friends said she felt betrayed, not just by William, but by Charles. After all, she had stood by his side through scandal, through criticism, through the long, painful road back to public favor. And yet now, when she needed his unwavering support, he offered only compromise. "She thought she had earned her place," said one insider. But the truth is, she never stopped being seen as the other woman by many. And this just confirmed it. But here's the cruel irony. Camilla's downfall wasn't just due to one confrontation. It was the culmination of years of private friction, quiet judgments, and subtle digs, finally brought to light because she crossed the wrong person. Not just Catherine, but the man willing to go to battle for her. William wasn't seeking revenge. He wasn't out for drama. He was setting a new precedent, one that said the monarchy must evolve if it wants to survive. Respect wasn't just expected anymore, it was required. And any threat to that, no matter how royal, would be met with consequence. One of the more dramatic ripples from this fallout, a proposal quietly circulated among royal advisors suggesting a complete restructuring of public-facing royal duties. At the heart of that proposal, a formal elevation of Catherine's role, not just in title, but in influence. The idea was simple. Catherine would begin to spearhead more major international engagements. Not just the usual hospital visits or ribbon cuttings, but diplomatic trips, global forums, and policy-driven appearances. It was a move designed to bolster the crown's image abroad and to prepare her for what many now believed was inevitable. "She's the future," one source close to the palace said plainly. "Everyone can see it. She's got the temperament, the intelligence, and most importantly, the people's trust." Camilla, meanwhile, saw her calendar whittled down to symbolic events. Her presence was now described as optional at best. And while Charles continued to appear beside her in private, the optics were carefully managed. Public engagements where the king appeared solo increased. Events where he appeared with Catherine soared in popularity. And while no official statement was ever released, royal watchers noted the pattern. "They're phasing her out," one commentator on BBC quietly observed. "Not with force, but with finesse." But don't mistake finesse for weakness. What happened inside those palace walls was nothing short of a revolution, and the quiet kind, mind you. The sort that rewrites protocol and shifts allegiances without a single headline screaming crisis. That's how the modern monarchy survives, not by scandal, but by recalibration. And this recalibration had a name: Catherine. She never campaigned for the crown, never lobbied for position. But in a time when authenticity has become rarer than rubies in royalty, she emerged as the real jewel. A woman who had never needed to raise her voice to be heard, because her silence spoke volumes. This shift hasn't gone unnoticed abroad, either. Foreign leaders and diplomats, traditionally briefed on royal hierarchy before engagements, began requesting Catherine specifically. "She represents stability," said one European ambassador. "When she enters the room, it's not just about the monarchy, it's about trust." And William? He stood tall beside her, not overshadowing, not leading alone, but walking in lockstep. A partnership in the truest sense. And in that partnership, the monarchy found its new foundation. There are still whispers, of course, that Camilla may try to reclaim lost ground, that behind closed doors, alliances are being reshuffled. But the truth? Most within the palace know the era has shifted. This isn't the age of damage control. It's the age of earned respect. The royal family has always operated on tradition. But traditions, as William has now shown, can be rewritten, especially when the well-being of the crown's future is at stake. And right now, the future doesn't look like a throne. It looks like a woman in heels, kneeling to hug a child, her brooch glinting in the sun. The queen consort may hold a title, but the people's queen? She's already arrived. And as for Prince William, the man once seen as too diplomatic, too cautious, too deferential, he's now a force. Because when it came time to choose between protocol and protection, he chose love. And in doing so, He chose legacy because one day, when the history books are written, this chapter won't be about who held what title or attended which event. It'll be about the quiet moment when a husband stood for his wife, when a woman's grace turned into power, and when the future of the monarchy turned its eyes to Catherine and never looked back.